Hi, y'all, and welcome to the live stream. I am so glad you are here tonight because this is the live stream not to miss. This is the one to see. We are at last at the end of the entire case, so we can put together all of the evidence, all of the case that's come in so far. Yesterday, huge day, the prosecution finally rested after 60 something witnesses, I think 61. And then the defense, in a surprise move or somewhat surprise move, said, nada. They said, we're not going to put on a case. We don't think the prosecution proved its case. That's it. We're going straight to the jury. Or they at least asked for a motion of acquittal from the court, which will almost certainly be denied. And the jury will get the case tomorrow. Tomorrow is closing arguments for both sides. Today, they did arguments on the jury instructions. So tomorrow, the jury will hear the closing arguments from both sides and hear the jury instructions from the judge about how they should go about deciding the case. We have everything now, everything that the prosecution put in, and we are going to look at all of it from start to finish. We're going to go as fast as possible using the timeline through all of the information that relates to why the prosecution says Lori Vallow Daybell should be convicted of murder of her 7-year-old son, JJ, her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, and of conspiring to murder the wife of Chad Daybell, who is now her husband. So we will be looking at all of that. I predict that the verdict is going to come very quickly. I mean, relatively in legal terms, it's going to be coming pretty quickly after the jury gets the case. We will go live when the jury verdict comes back, even if it's in the middle of the day, even if it's not at our 7 o'clock time, our usual time, we will go live when the verdict comes right away. I am so excited to bring that to you. I cannot wait. The court is actually going to let that go live from its own website. So we will be covering it. Do not miss that. If you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please do, because you don't want to miss tomorrow or Friday, whenever it is that the jury comes back when we go live. Also, if you would, please hit that like button. That'll help this video get out to more people. I'd appreciate it. I had a good question from somebody in the chat before we got started from S Cypher 777. He said, okay, what's the next project? What's the next case? That is a great question for you. Write it now, if you would, in the comments. What case do you want to handle next? What case really interests you? Where would you like to go next in our channel? So tonight's overview is designed whether you have been following the case for a long time or you haven't been. You can understand and follow along. I know it will seem kind of overwhelming if we put it all together all at once. So what I'm going to do is try to break it down as easily as possible. There are 7 events essentially that you have to know about, and 10 people, and I add a few more in there, that you need to be able to identify who they are by the end of this. If you do that, you can figure out this case. You will understand the basics of what the prosecution is contending. And then we're going to fit all kinds of evidence around that so you can follow along. Now, the start of this drama is Lori Vallow. At the start of this drama, at the start of the timeline that I'm going to show you, Lori Vallow is married to Charles Vallow, and Chad Daybell is married to Tammy Daybell. Lori has a daughter, Tylee, by a prior marriage, and she and Charles Vallow have adopted a son, JJ. Chad and Tammy, on the other hand, have 5 kids, young adults. But in a 4-month period, from July to October 2019, Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, is going to die. Then Lori's daughter, Tylee, then Lori's son, JJ, and then Chad's wife, Tammy. And 2.5 weeks after Chad's wife, Tammy, dies, Lori and Chad are going to get married. So I'm going to take you through all of the evidence. I'm also going to be doing a video on top 10 evidence, most important pieces of evidence in the case. Help me decide. It's hard to pick that. So if you would, as I go through, put anything in the comments that really strikes you as, that's a big one. To me, that one really mattered. Put that in there. And you can definitely vote more than once because I appreciate your help. So what are the 7 events you need to know? Let's go ahead and share the timeline. And I put those events in red. So the 7 events you have to know are July 11th, 2019, Alex Cox shot and killed Charles Vallow. That was Lori's husband at the time. And the claim is that it was self-defense. Alex said that, Lori said that, Tylee, the daughter, said that. The next event you have to know is when the prosecution contends Tylee was killed. Tylee was 16, and the prosecution says she was killed sometime between September 8th and September 9th, a couple of months after Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex. And Alex, by the way, is the brother of Lori Vallow Daybell. I'll show you a diagram. Then about 2 weeks after Tylee was killed, sometime between September 22nd and September 23rd, the prosecution says JJ, 7-year-old JJ, was also murdered. Then on October 2nd, somebody shoots at a man named Brandon Boudreaux in a Jeep in Gilbert, Arizona. You may think, how on earth could that be connected to all of these other murders, which happened in Idaho? But we'll get into that and explain it. Now, Brandon Boudreaux says he's on his way home. He's nearing his house and he sees the rear window of a Jeep parked right near his house. The rear window rolls down, a gun with a silencer sticks out, and somebody shoots him. The prosecution believes that shooter was Alex Cox. The next event you have to know is the 9th of October, when somebody shot at Tammy Daybell while she was in her driveway. And the next to last event you have to know is October 19th, when in the early morning hours, Chad called 911 and said he woke to find his wife of almost 30 years, Tammy Daybell, dead. The prosecution contends she died of asphyxiation and it was murder. Then on November 5th, 2019, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell marry. Now, those are the primary events, and all of the facts fit around that and put it into context. Those are the events that matter for purposes of this. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about that. And I'm going to give you just a quick overview of who's who. So the quick overview, and please, no one run screaming from the room when you see this diagram, because I'm sure you look at this and go, I'll never understand this case. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. We're going to go through it really slowly. I promise it will not be overwhelming. So just initially, just look at 5 of the little bubbles. You want to look at Lori. She's the one on trial. Her now husband, Chad Daybell. Chad is going to be on trial, but his case was separated from her, so he'll be on trial later. And then I want you to look at the 3 red circles. Tylee Ryan, she's the 16-year-old. And the prosecution says she and her brother, her adopted brother, JJ Vallow, died, both of them in September of 2019. The other red circle is Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, Lori is accused of murder or conspiracy for all 3 of those people named in the red circles, the 2 children and Tammy Daybell. So that's all you have to know right now. We will get into more as we go through it. So let's move over to the timeline and start off at the beginning. What we know about when Chad and Lori met is that they met sometime before November of 2018. The exact date isn't known, but they visited Idaho Falls Temple together in 2018. And Chad's love story gives that date for their sealing in the temple. Now, a sealing is a term used in the Mormon religion to relate to a permanent joining of a man and woman for all time. And then on January of 2019, and this is before any of the murders happened, Lori says to her friend, Audrey Barriatero, I'm excited to be able to talk with you about what we both know. And I just think it's fun to talk to someone who knows what's really going on. Now, the prosecution says with pretty good evidence that by this time, Lori and Chad were in a full-on affair. Lori married to another man, Chad married to another woman, but they are having an affair. Then at the end of January, Chad Daybell's email searches for Ned Schneider and found a 1997 Louisiana obituary. And I'm going to go ahead and flip over for just a minute and tell you a little bit about their beliefs, because you do have to understand that in order to understand the case. So here are the beliefs that Chad and Lori had as explained by the numerous witnesses. And thank you to M. Meyer. I appreciate the super sticker. So according to what the witnesses said, Chad and Lori believed that they were called as a couple to a mission, which would be leading the 144,000 in the end times and ridding the world of zombies. The 144,000 would be based in Rexburg, Idaho, and Chad and Lori were going to be in charge. They believed that people live multiple lives, that they have been reincarnated. They called it multiple. They had multiple lives, is what they said. They have been married to each other in prior lives, in these multiple probations that they have been through. People, they said, are either light or dark, which would be good or evil, and they can be rated between 1 and 6. Most Mormons, they said, are a 2, and they put billions of people in that category. I assume non-Mormons are a 1, but I didn't see that. But most Mormons are a 2. Chad and Lori were much higher on the scale. People also can be rated as near death or not near death. An evil person would be near death when they're approaching 0. A good person near death when they're approaching 100, at least as far as I could tell. Evil spirits can inhabit human bodies and cast out the real spirit owner of the body. These inhabited evil spirit bodies become our zombies. The body has to be killed to free the real person's spirit from someplace that they're trapped, because the zombie has taken over the body. So you can cast out the evil spirit, but you only have, according to Zulema, one of Lori's friends, 2 minutes to destroy the body before another evil spirit can enter it. To destroy it, you have to burn it or bind it. And the prosecution says, just coincidentally, everybody getting in the way of Chad and Lori, or annoying them, or just being in the way of them spending their time alone together as basically empty nesters, all of those people became possessed by evil spirits, conveniently became zombies, and all of them ended up dead. And that's the prosecution's theory about how the religious beliefs played into Chad and Lori's decision, according to the prosecution, to murder all of these people. And I want to say thank you to Kathy Bledsoe for the super sticker. So let's go back then to the timeline and talk about some more about the beliefs and what they were saying. So Chad searches for Ned Schneider. Now, Ned Schneider is going to be the name of an evil spirit that Chad is going to tell Lori possesses her husband, who is getting in the way of Chad and Lori being together. And according to him, Ned Schneider possessed Charles Vallow. So Lori tried several times something called casting, sort of like casting out of demons, to remove more than one evil spirit from Charles Vallow. Now, Charles Vallow, perhaps not surprisingly, in this same time when she says he's possessed by an evil spirit, asks the police to give her a mental health exam. And he also initiates divorce proceedings against her, which later are put on hold. Then from February to roughly April of 2019, Lori abruptly left Charles and JJ and went to Hawaii. For at least a part of the time, the daughter Tylee was with her. But during this time, Lori does not communicate with Charles Vallow, who is casting about on his own for how to take care of JJ. And his sister, Kay Woodcock, comes and is assisting with helping with JJ. JJ was autistic, and he was actually, and this a little complicated, and I'll show you. I'll pull this back up, so we'll add a few more people to our knowledge base. Lori was married to Charles Vallow, who was shot, as I pointed out earlier. And Lori and Chad adopted J.J. Vallow. J.J. Vallow was actually the grandson of Kay Woodcock, who was the sister of Charles Vallow. So in other words, Charles adopted his nephew. He adopted J.J., who was his nephew, and Lori did as well. So they were actually the adoptive parents. All right, so let's move back to our timeline. So during this period, Alex Cox writes to Lori, Charles's body is still alive. The prosecution would point to this as proof that as early as March of 2019, Lori believed that if she did this casting correctly, if they got rid of the evil body, Charles would die. And that's the argument that the prosecution is going to make. Now, throughout this period, Chad and Lori continue to be together. They visit LDS Temple Latter-day Church, Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, or LDS or Mormon. They visit temples together. And importantly, in May, they search together for malachite jewelry. That, in fact, is what their wedding bands ultimately were made of, is malachite jewelry. And both Lori and Chad searched for that kind of jewelry in May of 2019. At the time, Lori's husband, Charles Vallow, still alive. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, still alive. But they're searching for jewelry that ultimately will become their wedding rings. Now, Chad Daybell also searched for Hiplos in June of 2019. That was the name of the new spirit that allegedly was in Charles Vallow. When Charles didn't die with all these castings, according to Chad, there were new spirits that kept coming in, new evil spirits that just kept coming in and possessing Charles Vallow. And they would have a casting, try to get them out. It didn't work. Body was still alive, so they try again. Now, according to the prosecution, in a text message in July of, well, there were two different things really that happened in July. Many things actually that happened in July. And remember, we are in the 2-day period right before Alex Cox, the brother of Lori, is going to shoot and kill Charles Vallow and claim self-defense. Going to claim Charles Vallow came at him with a baseball bat and he had to do it. The prosecution went into great detail about what happened between Alex and Charles Vallow, how all of that happened. They talked about the testimony. They talked about the belief by law enforcement that it was not self-defense. Lori is being prosecuted. She is actually being prosecuted. And I'll pull up our people again. Lori is being prosecuted, or will be prosecuted. She's being charged with murder in connection with Charles Vallow's shooting by Alex Cox. And you'll see Alex Cox is in orange up at the top. That's Lori's brother. He's in orange because he also is dead. Charles Vallow, Lori, and Lori's prior husband, Joe Ryan, all dead. So that's why they're all in there in the orange. But Charles Vallow at this time still alive. Let's go back to our timeline. So on July 9th, Chad Daybell searches for when you surprise someone with accusations. That wasn't really explained by the prosecution, but probably they would say that he was suggesting that Lori Vallow surprise, or thought she would, surprise Charles Vallow with accusations. On the 9th, also, Lori wrote her niece, Melanie B., which is short for Melanie Boudreau, now Melanie Pulowski. And she said to her, because it should be clear, Melanie was a follower of Lori and Chad. She was one of the people in their group who believed and followed many of the things they taught related to the multiple lives, the zombies, the evil spirits, etc. So Lori writes to Melanie and says, they have an elaborate plan. I'll call you soon. And Melanie says, I could take all the babies with me and drive and take our stuff. And Lori says, you can't go at all. We both need to stay here to defend ourselves. And Lori says, it's coming to a head this week will change everything. Now, I believe the prosecution would say they were referring to a plan by Lori's family to try to talk to her about her crazy beliefs as they saw them, that her husband, Charles Vallow, was possessed by an evil spirit. Lori also wrote to Alex, and this is critical in the prosecution's beliefs about what happened with Charles Vallow. Lori wrote to Alex saying, "Getting sleepy, so I'm going to need you to stay close to me for the next couple days. Mel too. She can't go to Utah. They," and that means probably Lori's family, I wrote that in there, that's what I think it means, "are planning some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week." And this is the very week when Charles Vallow is going to be shot in, quote, self-defense. "I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you." Prosecution thinks that's really important because Nephi was, in the Book of Mormon, ordered to kill Laban. And in fact, that is what's about to happen in just 2 days. Lori there with Alex, and they're about to shoot and kill. Charles Vallow, Lori's husband at the time. So on the 10th, Lori tells her niece, Melanie, Al, her brother, Alex Cox, is here. Charles says he will come over in the morning. That's the morning. The very next morning, Alex Cox shoots and kills Charles Vallow, claiming it was self-defense. Now, the prosecution put in, I want to say thank you to Mr. RN. I appreciate that very much. Alex Cox, the next morning, Lori texted a very cold message to Charles Vallow's 2 older adult sons. She then absolutely, really pretty much ghosts them. She won't answer their text messages. How did he die? What do you mean he died? She literally just texts them, "Hey, Dad died, so sorry, love you, bye," more or less. And the prosecution put that text message in, and they write back, what do you mean died? Yeah, died how? What happened? And she doesn't respond. You have to answer. You can't just leave us hanging. And she never does answer their question about what happened. Then on the 13th, Chad texts Lori saying, concerning it's a complicated, what he's saying basically, and I'll shorten it, is that he is about to go through the graduation ceremonies of 2 of his kids and his son-in-law, and that I feel likely she, and I believe that means his wife, Tammy, will be gone by then in just 2 weeks' time, but I will still have the hoopla to deal with. So I believe that's why the Lord is making me wait. So what Chad, according to the prosecution, is saying is that he believes his wife, Tammy, is going to be dead. He told numerous people, according to testimony, that he believed she would die before the age of 50. Well, she was, in fact, 49 when she died, but the prosecution said she had some help and that she was asphyxiated. So let's keep going. Now, this is, remember, within days, this is 4 days after Lori's husband was shot and killed. And Chad sends her a love story about a man called James and a woman called Elena. He sends it to her by multiple different text messages. And it is, according to the prosecution, the story of Chad and Lori. It's just written with different people's names. There is, for example, this passage. He knew he was in the presence of an exalted goddess who had returned to earth to perform a special mission. This mission included being with him, and they would progress together as translated beings. The full plan wasn't completely clear to him, but the immense power radiating from her confirmed his belief that she was among the greater women in the universe. He discussed them in this book, them being sealed in the temple when they were married to other people. And the prosecution says a lot of this is Chad and Lori. It's just different names, dressed up in different names. That same day, Chad writes to Lori, "I need so badly to just gently kiss you for hours. It would likely lead to other activities." Lori to Chad, likely or luckily? And Chad, it would likely lead to nakedness. Also, On that same day, they were arranging to trick Tammy, Chad's wife, into believing Chad was going to a conference when really he was going to meet up with Lori. So the prosecution says there was nothing platonic about this. They were carrying on a full-fledged affair while Chad was married and just 3 days after Lori's husband was killed. And that the next day, Chad texted Lori saying, I know you won't get this text for another hour or so, but my love for you is overflowing right now. I just want to hold you endlessly. You are my wonderful best friend that I can't live without. And Lori writes, and yet you are. So sad, missing you, etc. The reason I think that particular text message is really important is because Lori is saying, but your wife is still alive and you're not with me. And I think that is one of the hooks the prosecution uses to pull Lori in to what they say is the murder of Tammy Daybell. She was not present when Tammy Daybell died. She was in Hawaii and Tammy Daybell died in Idaho. But the prosecution says she was part and parcel of the plan. Then on the 18th, a few days later, Lori gets an unpleasant surprise, and that's that the $1 million life insurance policy for Charles Vallow is no longer naming her as the beneficiary. Instead, Charles Vallow changed it to his sister, Kay Woodcock. And so she says, I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart, which is truly amazing when she acknowledges that she and her brother were present, that her brother killed him in self-defense, and she's upset that he changed the life insurance beneficiary. She says, who do you think he changed it to? Brandon, that's a family friend, or probably Kay, the grandmother, Kay Woodcock, his sister. He left nothing for JJ, which is untrue because he left it to Kay for JJ and for his sons. Chad says this is another step to bringing down the Gadiantons, especially Brandon. And let's go ahead and do a quick head back over into who is Brandon. Okay, Lori, I mentioned her niece, Melanie, that she texted several times. Well, Melanie at this time was married and divorcing Brandon Boudreaux. They were having a pretty unpleasant, ugly divorce and custody dispute. And Brandon is about to be important. He is going to be shot at, and that's also going to be relevant to this whole situation unraveling. All right, we'll head back over to the timeline. So at this point, Chad now begins to talk about an evil spirit in Tylee. This evil spirit they named Hillary, and according to Chad, this evil spirit was at a 0.13. Remember that for evil, anyway, close to zero is near death. So Chad is saying that the evil spirit in Tylee is near death. And Chad says to Lori, I turned up the pain to 10 and placed a spiritual virus in her. In other words, the body that to everyone else looks like Tylee, he turned up the pain in the body, this is apparently through prayer, and placed a spiritual virus in her. He also told her that JJ is at 99.99, which I take to mean that JJ was on the good side, but also near death. And it says that Raphael, which is another name Chad called himself, visited JJ, and told him to follow Amy into the light. I do not know who Amy is. I also assured him that James, remember that's another name for Chad, would love and take care of his mommy, which he will with all of his heart and soul. And Lori's response is, that is so sweet. So here, Chad has just said, your children are both near death. I turned up the pain in Tylee and placed a spiritual virus in her. And I told JJ that he should go into death, that he should proceed into death. Don't worry, I'll take care of his mom. And her response is, that is so sweet. Not, you are appalling. Not you have frightened me. What are you saying about my children? But that is so sweet. Chad also writes her saying, you are so adorable, beautiful, wonderful, heavenly, luscious, and angelic. So many divine attributes rolled into one dynamic, desirable package. He says, just grab me by the storm and I will follow you to the ends of the universe. Storm is a sexual reference related to Chad's anatomy, and Chad wants to know when that can be. And Lori says, Wednesday evening, and then repeatedly and gloriously until Friday. And then what, says Chad? And Lori says, back to crying and saying goodbye, back to the box. Again, supporting the prosecution statement that this is no platonic relationship. This is a full-on affair, and that they repeatedly refer to their families as a box, as something that's confining them, that traps them. And the prosecution says ultimately it leads to their decision to kill and murder the people around them. On the 19th of July, there are text messages about Melanie Boudreau's children. Remember, that's the niece, Lori's niece. And they are really disturbing because they suggest that that the group also believed that Melanie Boudreau's children were occupied by evil spirits, but fortunately they're all still alive, as I understand it. So Lori said, what's Blake's percentage, to Chad? He drew 3 crosses on the wall in his bedroom. We just finished painting over them, like he was marking it for the dark side to find him. And Chad writes back, Blake is a 7. I took my sword of life and sliced his aura vertically in several places. You should be able to now rip and burn it. I also decreased his pain tolerance to 1% and greatly increased his pain. His desire to depart is at 80%. In other words, just like with Lori's kids, they were looking for this child to experience pain and to depart. On the 21st, Lori wrote, found it. Then she's back to the life insurance issue. Ned, which is Charles Vallow, one of the spirits, gave all of it, the life insurance, to Rhonda. That was a name they used for Kay. They didn't call anybody by their real names. So Rhonda was Kay Woodcock, the grandmother of JJ. And Lori said, it fits. Now she will try to take JJ from her. And Chad said, we will work hard on Rhonda when we are together. I will get her numbers as low as I can by Wednesday, by which I understand him to mean get her near death. And Lori said, good, let's work on it hard. So the prosecution has certainly planted the seed in the jury's minds that this plan wasn't really limited to just the people who died. They were willing or interested in making sure other people were eliminated too. Then on the 21st, Lori also wrote, I love you more than ever and can't wait to be with you forever. I'm begging Father and Mother. That's my job tonight. And Chad said, I will be right beside you begging you. On the 21st, then, a very frightening search. Lori, in a Gmail called Lolly Time Forever, searches Gerber Life Policy life insurance for children. As far as we know, no life insurance was actually purchased or received or claimed for either JJ or Tylee. But it's a scary thought. Then on the 22nd, Chad and Lori texted about Kauai, which is where they ultimately got married and where they lived right after their marriage, and the plan. And Chad says, love you. Lori says, I love you. Not as much as I love you, etc. They talked about a movie with scenery from Hawaii. And Lori said, hopefully we can be there someday soon together. And Chad says, that is the plan and my greatest desire. Prosecution says they were planning this. This was something they fully intended. On the 23rd, Lori said, Tylee is being super sweet and helpful, and she cleaned her room. See if she got switched. Totally not her. Chad said, yes, she was switched, and I think that meant from good to evil, from the real spirit, from the evil spirit to the real person. Please let me know when you can talk and I will explain it. On the 26th, Lori said that JJ was calm and watched movies, which he would never do. And Chad writes, it is still JJ. I'm told she is lying about him being calm and watching movies. So by this point, it seems that they think JJ also has an evil spirit. That's what it sounds like. On the 26th, there's more talk about Melanie's children in the statement. She is taking it well and knows it is part of a big plan. Also discussion about wanting to speed things up a bit, and that becomes a theme. Lori is impatient. She wants to help God along with his goal of getting rid of all these people who are impairing them from their mission. And we'll see that more. On the 26th, there's also a search for one of the sadder points, I guess, of the case, in which there are many sad points. But Lori sells service dog and service dogs for sale, and she sold JJ, the autistic child's service dog, as they moved to Rexburg, Idaho. This is just shortly after his father died. Then on the 29th, Lori went on a car trip with Melanie Boudreau and her 2 kids. And there was this statement from Chad. Do you want me to cause pain yet to those 2 threes that you're riding with? And Lori says, hold off, but I'll text you if they start acting up and we can zap them. And Chad says, yes, if they are going to act up, we'll at least give them a reason to scream. I love, cherish, treasure, and adore you. The wonderful memories just keep coming back. And the juxtaposition of those two, on the one hand, let's give children a reason to scream and love you, think you're great, great memories, just bizarre. On the 29th, Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother, writes saying, will you at least let JJ attend my brother's, his father's, Charles Vallow's memorial service? And Lori forwards it to Chad, and Chad says, she doesn't seem inclined to share the money. She doesn't inclined to want to share that insurance money. And Lori says, they're jerks. I'm not going to respond to them ever. And she doesn't. And JJ does not get to go to the memorial service for his father. On the 30th, Chad writes, Tammy is very close, and I believe he means close to death. Her percentage has fallen steadily since Hiplos left. Remember, Hiplos was the evil spirit in Charles Vallow at the end there. It is encouraging. So Chad is encouraged that his wife is near death, that her percentage has fallen steadily. And Lori says, what's the percentage now? What about JJ's too? Again, are they close to death? And Chad says, Tammy is at 3, JJ is at 2. Lori says, 2 and 3%, not 0? Clearly disappointed that it wasn't lower than it was, that they were still a ways off from death. And Chad writes, this afternoon, Tammy said she felt lightheaded, as if her body and spirit weren't connected. We're going to have a fabulous life together. And I left out some stuff in the middle, but it's truly astonishing text messages that have been put in by the prosecution to support its case. On August 7th, Lori talked about Melanie's children again, definitely had demons helping her as she put holes in the walls and doors. And this really important quote from Lori to Chad, we, meaning Lori and Melanie, are both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them. Please ask the Lord to take my children. Let them die, please. And Lori and Chad on that same day have a fight. Chad won't respond. Lori won't respond to Chad. And he says, you know, you've lost the protections I gave you, but if you give me a thumbs up, I'll work to get them back. And she does respond, I love you, but that wasn't what he said. He said, I want you to respond with a thumbs up. So he says, Grandpa Keith, his deceased grandfather, is here with me. I am supposed to warn you that you are unprotected. The angels are angry that you are ignoring me. I'm honestly not trying to manipulate you to respond. I understand that you need your space, but they say you have cut me off and the protection I built around your house is gone. I love you and don't want you getting attacked. They said that if you at least give me a thumbs up, it will restore our protections. And the defense, I think, will point to things like this to support their argument. The defense says, Lori was under the influence of Chad. She wasn't the only woman. Numerous women were under Chad's influence and were swayed by him. And she just followed him around. It was all Chad. And that's why some of these things from Lori, like, please ask the Lord to take them. We're so weary of taking care of demons. Those things hooked Lori back in, not just Chad. They hooked Lori in, and that's why they're so important. On the 10th of August, and we're moving up toward the move to Rexburg, Idaho, and then the deaths, Lori says JJ was up saying crazy stuff and asked, is he at 0 yet? Like, seriously, is he at 0? And Lori says, do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children and we just have to wait for it to be carried out? I feel lost, like I should be doing something to help. And the prosecution was going to say that that's very important. She wanted to help. It wasn't just that she wanted God to take the children. She wanted to help. She was impatient. And Chad says, yes, he's at 0. There is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night, but it's been taken from my mind, of course, and makes other comments like cheek to cheek, loin to loin. It isn't very far away, my love. And Lori says, I can't wait. Literally cannot wait. I have no patience. I want you now. She asks again, do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children and we just have to wait for it to be carried out? What should I be doing? And Chad says, the Lord told me she is on the right track. He said to just keep resolving the telestial issues so you are unencumbered, by those pesky kids and fully free. And Chad said, JJ is getting close. When I was sitting across from him eating bacon, I sensed he was barely attached to his body. So Chad is saying he's nearly there. He is near death. On the 11th, Chad was bemoaning having to take a trip with his extended family, so trapped. And Lori said, is that what God wants? For me to sit around waiting for you endlessly and you miserably wasting time? It just doesn't feel right. And this is one of the most important sentences in the entire trial thus far. Chad says, we are surrounded by telestial relatives that are simply obstacles. I'm so sick of it. And Lori says, me too. What is that? What is it that you really want? And Chad says, I want to be with you. That's my greatest hope and dream. I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. And clearly their relationship was progressing. On the 26th of August, Lori's email was searching wedding bands, not just a search for malachite, but wedding bands made of malachite, which is symbolic of joy and transformation and absorbing pain. Lori, Alex, Melanie Boudreau, Tylee, and JJ all moved to Rexburg, Idaho toward the end, that's an approximate date, right at the end of August. And then just a few days later, Lori enrolled JJ in the elementary school right there in Rexburg, Idaho. Now, on the 3rd, Alex set up their new Wi-Fi system, and he texted her that the Wi-Fi password was going to be too many kids, which Lori said was funny. He also made the comment to her, I'm proud of you, no more Z's, which the prosecution thinks means zombies. And this sentence also critically important. We are trying to get to the bottom of what we need to do to eliminate them completely. I'm sure you will be told also. That is proactive by Lori. Eliminating them completely, getting to the bottom of it. We are trying to get to it. So it's proactive. It's not just we're waiting. We think God is going to take them. Very proactive. Now, and in fact, things are about to begin happening. On the 7th, Chad and Lori visited a Latter-day Saints temple together. And then on the 8th, Lori, Alex, Tylee, and JJ all visited Yellowstone National Park. Those photos of Tylee there in the park are the last known proof of life of Tylee. And from the 8th to the 9th is when the prosecution says that Tylee was killed. The prosecution says that Alex Cox's phone, he called it Homer J. Maximus, was at Lori's apartment until midnight, which was very unusual. Normally he would be back in his own house. He wouldn't be right there. So the prosecution says Tylee was killed sometime overnight, the next morning, that night, but somewhere in there. And that very night, the reason why it might have been that night is that Chad Daybell searched for the direction of the wind. This is going to matter because Tylee's burned body parts were found in the fire pit in Chad's backyard, and her body was buried. Her burned body was buried in Chad's backyard. So he had good reason to search direction of the wind, the prosecution says. That next morning, when she was killed somewhere in there, the cell phone of Alex Cox was in the vicinity of Chad Daybell's home. And shortly after he left Chad Daybell's property, Chad and Lori and Alex all communicated a great deal by cell. Chad then writes what the prosecution says was just a cover-up text message to his wife, Tammy. He says, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times." The prosecution says that's just a cover-up for in case Tammy notices that somebody has been burning something in the fire pit, and in case Tammy notices that there's a new hole in the backyard where the dirt has been disturbed and where something's been buried, and that he was just making all that up. And the prosecution said he didn't normally write chatty text messages like that to Tammy. This is just pretend. Importantly, the prosecution managed to get satellite imagery from Chad's yard, believe it or not, that very day. And it showed a discolored area at the pet cemetery where, in fact, Tylee's body was found. On the 13th, Lori hired a babysitter to care for JJ. This was the reason she had to do that. Tylee used to do that, but now the prosecution says there's no Tylee. So she hires a babysitter to come every afternoon starting at 2:30 p.m. and on Saturday. And Chad and Lori still have their relationship going. Remember, Chad is married and living in the area, but he and Lori go to the temple together. And in her email searches, this is really important to the prosecution, on the 20th, she searches the Kennedy Elementary Rexburg phone number. Now, JJ is still alive. She is about to, within a few days, pull him out of school and come up with this story about how first she's going to send him to the grandparents' home for a while and he'll be schooled there. And when the school says, okay, sure, just send us that address and we'll send his records directly to them, she says, oh, did I say schooling in Mississippi? I meant I'm going to homeschool. So she says, but this is while JJ is still alive, and she's already searching the Kennedy Elementary School Rexburg phone number. And the prosecution, I believe, is going to argue that that's because she knew they were going to kill JJ even then. Now, on the 22nd, Lori had guests. Her good friend, Melanie Gibb, who testified at trial, Melanie's now husband, then boyfriend, David Warwick, who also testified at trial. And they see JJ being carried into the apartment by Alex Cox. He appears to be asleep. He's in red pajamas. And in fact, he was found dressed in red, or his body was found dressed in red in Chad Daybell's backyard. Now, the prosecution says that night, that is the night when JJ was killed, sometime between the 22nd and the 23rd. And here's some of the evidence around this that they say that in the wee hours, 3:59 to 8:34 a.m., Chad sent numerous text messages to Lori. and at 9:25 a.m. called Alex and then called Lori 3 times. And then there from 9:55 to 10:12, Alex was on Chad Daybell's property near a small pond, and they used his cell phone for this, to close to where JJ's body was actually found. And then at 10:20, he seemed to be leaving the property. He was in Rexburg, and Alex and Lori talked for 9 minutes. So the prosecution says that Alex was there with the body, or at least they imply that, and it was there for the burial. It is not clear how they managed to get him buried so quickly, or how they managed to get Tylee buried so quickly. The exact time frames are not clear, but the prosecution says we've got enough around this for the jury to be able to tell that they murdered these kids. They don't have to know, the prosecution says, that they buried them at 10:04. They just have to know that it happened. And so that next morning, Alex is over at Chad's house, and Melanie Gibb and David Warwick say that they woke up in the morning and JJ was gone. They said, "Where's JJ?" And Lori said he was being a zombie and that Alex Cox took him. And that is the last anyone saw of JJ while he was alive, was the night when Melanie Gibb and David Warwick say they saw him being carried into the house by Alex Cox. And he was what they thought was asleep on Alex Cox's shoulder. So we know that, or we can pretty much tell, the prosecution says, that JJ wasn't alive because that babysitter texts Lori, "Hey, I'm supposed to come over and babysit for you, remember?" And Lori says, "Oh, his grandparents came and took him to give me a break." And Chad and Lori, again, visit the temple together, this time in Rexburg, a little closer to home. And then, critically important, on the 30th of September, Lori searches how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler. Now, you may say, why? Why would she search how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler, and why is this important? Well, we are about to find out. This is all related to the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. Let's go back to our chart. Remember, Brandon Boudreaux, he's in purple because while he wasn't killed, somebody did shoot at Brandon Boudreaux. Remember, he's in a bitter divorce with Melanie, who is close to Lori, her aunt. Somebody shoots at Brandon Boudreaux, and the prosecution says it's Alex Cox. And that Lori was involved, that she was part and parcel of it, and she is in fact going to be prosecuted for that. So as we lead up to that, Lori rented a 10 by 10 storage unit in Rexburg, and Chad, Alex went multiple times. And what actually was put there for the most part is the kid stuff, Tylee stuff, JJ. Why? They didn't need it anymore, cluttering up the place. So they put it in the storage. That would be the prosecution's argument. And then on the 2nd, Lori and Chad visited the storage facility and put the spare tire and what the prosecution says looks like the rear seat from the Jeep Wrangler into the storage unit. The very next day, actually that same day, someone shoots at Brandon Boudreaux in Gilbert, Arizona. According to the prosecution, Alex drove all the way from Idaho down to Gilbert, Arizona to shoot Brandon Boudreaux, which he failed to do. But he was driving Tylee's Jeep, according to the prosecution. And so Brandon Boudreaux is driving home, sees the gun stick out, remember, of the rear of the Jeep. That window would not have gone all the way down with the tire or with the rear seat there. That's why they took that out, the prosecution said. And somebody shot at him and fortunately missed. That very same day, Lori searched for Gilbert, Arizona news. The implication would be she was looking to see, had it been reported that someone had shot at Brandon Boudreaux and what was being said about that. That was sort of the beginning of the end, along with Kay Woodcock's search for JJ, because Brandon Boudreaux recognized that Jeep. He recognized it because he had been the insurance agent and had helped procure the insurance for Charles Vallow when he bought that Jeep for Tylee. And so he said, I think the Jeep that shot at me was the one Charles bought for Tylee. And had them follow it through. And it was in the course of that they got in touch with Lori, that they found out, and that the whole connection with Kay Woodcock, who was by now looking for JJ. Where is JJ? JJ and Tylee were, as far as the world knew, just missing throughout a very long period of time. So, and then the day after the shooting at Brandon Boudreaux, Lori and Chad went back to that storage unit and they got out the rear seat and the spare tire. On the 3rd, also, Chad texted Lori, because we're headed up toward the Tammy incidents. He said, big news about Tammy. She has been switched. Tammy is in limbo. That means her good spirit is trapped, and a level 3 demonic entity named Viola is in her body. According to the prosecution, what would that do? It would clear the way for Chad and Lori to take Tammy out, because she's now a zombie. She's no longer Tammy. She's this evil spirit. So Chad texted Lori at 4:20 a.m. You can just picture him lying in bed next to his zombie-occupied wife, and he texts Lori, dreaming of caressing you in your bed. That same day, he urges Tammy to visit her family in Utah. About this time, Alex starts going to the Unified Sportsman Club for target practice. Now, this wasn't as strong evidence as I think the prosecution wanted, because the prosecution had to admit he usually didn't sign in as Alex Cox. They looked through it and they believed that his license plate was CP Quint. So this C Quint who signed in was Alex. So they say he went and repeatedly practiced, which might make sense in that he just missed Brandon Boudreaux when he shot at him. And I want to say thank you to Janice Griggs. I appreciate the super chat. And about this time, Lori searched traveling to Missouri, and on the 9th, she is conveniently away from Idaho. And what is about to happen is someone is going to shoot at Tammy Daybell on the 9th. A very strange incident. She's in her driveway unloading groceries when a man in a mask walks up to her, shoots at her. She says nothing comes out. She thinks it's a paintball gun, and this is maybe some neighbor kid, bipolar neighbor kid from down the street. She says that's who it was. But it was a very strange incident. But the prosecution says that was no kid, that was no neighbor, that was no paintball gun. That was Alex Cox with the real gun, and he just missed again, or it didn't fire. Something went wrong with the gun. Maybe he needed even more practice at the Unified Sportsman Club than he had gotten. So Alex, according to the prosecution, a lot of things happened around the shooting of Tammy Daybell, shooting at incident with Tammy Daybell. There were 90 phone calls in about a 20-hour period between Alex and Lori and Chad and Lori's friend Zulema, who later married Alex. And Chad texted Lori from a new number he bought. They constantly bought different phones with different numbers. So this was a 401 number. Then Alex's phone was at the Sportsman warehouse, and they had some evidence about what they thought was purchased by Alex there. And they connected it back. It was purchased with cash, so they couldn't say for sure, but they believed it was items that were needed for this. Then Alex's phone was on the road of the Daybell's house, and then was just briefly, really, and about 10 minutes later was gone again, heading back to his townhome. And then after that, they exchanged another ton of text messages. He also searched Homer J. Maximus searched for how to clean a Grendel AR, which is a gun, and what a Grendel AR might do through a Dodge Dakota. The Daybells owned a Dodge Dakota. So all of these things and let me add one other thing. Meanwhile, in Missouri, Lori has told her friends about Tammy's being occupied by this evil spirit Viola, and she and her friends are attempting a casting on Tammy to cast out Viola, the evil spirit. And apparently they felt like that would kill the body and free Tammy. At least that's what sort of the implication has been. There's been so little defense that argument almost has not been made. You almost have to make that argument for the defense even. Not that it's a defense to murder, and maybe that's why they haven't bothered it to make it. But all of this happens around the time that somebody shoots at Tammy Daybell. Misses, nothing happens, Tammy's fine. And then there is a 38-minute phone call between Alex and Zulema. And I want to say thank you to Patty Hackney. I appreciate that. Alex goes to the Unified Sportsman Club again, or at least C. Quint does. And Lori tells her friend a few days later, we got her out, meaning the prosecution would say Viola, but a brand new one got in. And brothers, remember that they believed that if you didn't destroy the body, a new evil spirit could occupy right away. And so Lori says, well, we got out that evil spirit, but there's another one there. So we're still working on it. Audrey, any ideas you have would be greatly appreciated. Then on the 18th, and this is really important because we are now leading up to the death of Tammy Daybell. We're leading up. Oh, I don't even look at that. I am sorry. I don't have my timeline up. Okay. So we are leading up to the death of Tammy Daybell. So all of these facts are surrounding that and heading into the death of Tammy Daybell. So at this point, this is the day before, and the prosecution might even say perhaps the day Tammy was killed. We know that in the early morning hours, I think 6 or 7, Chad calls 911 and says he woke up to find Tammy Daybell dead. When law enforcement arrives, she's already cold, and so Chad says she must have died in the night. That happened overnight. The prosecution says, well, she died of asphyxiation. That's how she died. She died of that. Not natural causes, which is what the initial death certificate said. That was the initial finding. But as we lead into that, we have numerous text messages between Chad and Lori and Alex. Lori and Chad had a 49-minute call. Alex Cox's phone, or at least what they believe is his phone, was at a church near Chad Daybell's home. And Tammy, meanwhile, that evening is just playing games on her phone. Now, Chad says she just up and died at age 49, just as he had suspected all along. He had known she was going to die before age 50, and sure enough, it was 49, natural causes. But everybody who testified said she was just fine and healthy. No one had any idea that she had any illness or would have died. So she's in there playing games on her phone. Something mysterious that at 11:28 at night, a JPEG was deleted from her phone. No explanation of what that would be. But at 11:34 and 11:35, Chad texts Lori. We don't know what was said in that. At 11:46, Alex leaves the parking lot of the Latter-day Saints church near Chad and travels south. So the prosecution is implying that somehow Alex was involved in the asphyxiation. We don't really know anything about that. That's just been the implication so far. Oh, thank you, Salty C. I appreciate the super sticker very much. Thank you. So we are, and let me make sure I got off from the scrolling downward. Okay. That next day, into the next day, and still Chad won't call 911 for several hours. Alex calls Lori. His phone is north of Idaho Falls. Lori texts her friend Zulema, and Chad texts Lori. Lori has an alibi, as she says it, through all of this. And her alibi, she says, is that she was in Hawaii. That was confirmed by FBI cast member Nick Balance. That should be 2 L's. And Nick says, yes, she was in Hawaii. We acknowledge that. But the prosecution says it doesn't matter. She's not being prosecuted because she, put a pillow over Tammy Daybell and smothered her. She's being prosecuted for conspiring, being part of the plan to kill Tammy Daybell. And just bizarrely, on the day his wife died, she died that morning, as far as he's concerned. He calls 911 and says she died this morning. And he texts Lori Not fun without you. Can you call me? As if he was really expecting to be having a great time on the day his wife of 30 years died. Lori texts Chad, I'm missing you more. I need you desperately. I can't wait. Chad says to Lori, need you to hold me tight. That would be great. All on the actual day of Tammy's death. Tammy's funeral was on the 22nd. On that day, Lori texted Chad 3 times and he responded at least once. They talked about missing each other. And Chad said to Lori, I'm feeling sad, but it isn't for the reason everyone thinks, which is truly amazing. I mean, he had a wife. His children were, of course, distraught that their mother had died, his 5 children, but he's not feeling sad for the reason everyone thinks, which I presume would be because your spouse died, which normally would be something that would cause you to feel sad. Instead, he's feeling sad that he's not with Lori, and it's not all that fun. Thank you to Janice Griggs. I appreciate it. So Alex, the prosecution talked about Alex taking guns out of storage and putting them in his pickup truck. Very importantly and coldly, on the 22nd, Tammy is having her funeral and Lori is doing searches for wedding dresses and wedding dresses in Kauai. Lori then texts Chad the next day, I had a bad dream about Alex Cox, in other words. Make sure he is still him and protect him. He would be the one they used to get us both. All this alone time is not good for him. And the prosecution is going to say the reason that Lori is saying that is because she's worried because Alex has been used by Chad and Lori to execute or bury or help with the execution of numerous people. And Chad says, I'll try to reach out to him later today. And then says, I just cleared all of Al's weapons, curses, and cords and filled him with malachite healing balm. I also put angels around him. And this really strange message, Alex Cox, multiple creation, 4th creation, exalted 9 times, sibling to me 2 times, on 4th creation, and became eternal companions after 4th creation. His mission is to help Lori. That is important to the prosecution. They had numerous witnesses talk about the fact that Alex believed everything that Chad and Lori said, and that he was told his role in the end times was to protect Lori. That was his job, to be protector. In fact, that was the whole reason he had been sent to Earth, was to protect her. And on the 28th, Alex removes some more gun storage cases, puts them in his pickup truck. On November 5th, this is just 17 days after Tammy died, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell married in Hawaii, wearing the white wedding clothes that Lori had been searching for on the day of Tammy's funeral, exchanging the malachite ring she had searched for and he had searched for as well. Significantly before this, all of that happened on November 5th. Thank you, Lori Howell. I appreciate it. On the 26th, at the request of JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, police performed a welfare check on JJ. They went to Lori's apartment in Rexburg. They had started in Arizona, but with that Jeep, that search for the Jeep, they got in touch with the Arizona police. And the Arizona police had been in touch with Kay Woodcock. She thought they were in Arizona. She didn't even know they had gone to Idaho. And they performed this welfare check. And Chad actually tells them, they know Chad and Lori are married, but Chad tells them he hardly knows Lori and that they've only met a couple of times. Lori tells him that JJ is with her friend, Melanie Gibb, in Arizona. She says if Melanie doesn't answer, it's because she took JJ to see the movie Frozen 2. Very specific, very specific. She went to see Frozen 2. The next day, the police execute search warrants at the townhomes where Lori, Alex, and Melanie B were living, and they're gone. They're all gone. Lori's, they said, looked like people lived there with things, in the kitchen and everything, but the clothes were all gone. All of the clothes were gone. The garage had guns, and Alex's was mostly empty with some hazmat-looking white suits around. Shortly after that, 2 days afterwards, in fact, Alex Cox and Zulema married in Las Vegas. On the night, sometime, I couldn't actually find an actual date, but sometime in December of 2019, very early on, Melanie Gibb, and Melanie Gibb is a friend where Lori said, my son JJ is with my friend Melanie Gibb in Arizona. Melanie Gibb initially lied to the police, or at least was not really clear with the police, but shortly after that went to police and said, I don't have JJ. So the police know that, and Melanie secretly records a conversation with Lori and with Chad. She tells Lori, real friends don't tell the police I have a child when I don't have that child. And Lori says, well, I know exactly where JJ is, and he's safe and he's happy, which is really, really not true. Melanie says she feels weird about all these deaths and the things that are happening. And Lori says, this sounds like you have been influenced by somebody dark and obeyed dark things, and the ultimate example of gaslighting. Then also early in December, on the 12th of December, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, dies in Zulema's home in Gilbert, Arizona. There has been much speculation about whether or not that was, as the autopsy report concluded, truly natural causes, or whether Lori and Chad somehow orchestrated that because they wanted to silence him. But there had been no charges. The autopsy report said that they concluded it was natural causes, and that's where that case has been left, if you would call it a case. Then in February, Lori tells her older sister, Summer Shiflett, that she knows where the kids are and they're safe. Remember, all this time, people are searching for JJ. People are searching for Tylee. Where are they? They're missing. Lori has not admitted that they're dead. Chad hasn't admitted it. So as far as law enforcement, as far as their relatives and their loved ones know, they're just missing. And Lori keeps saying they're fine, but I had to hide them because people wanted to harm them. But Lori tells her older sister they're safe. I know where they are. They're fine. On the 9th of June, that story was put to rest. Law enforcement searched Chad Daybell's backyard. They found JJ and Tylee's bodies both buried there. Tylee's body was burned. JJ's mouth had been covered by duct tape. His face and head were wrapped tightly in plastic bags and duct tape. His ankles and wrists were bound by duct tape. And one hair belonging to Lori was found on the duct tape. At the scene, Chad was sitting there in his car. As he sees them find the first body, he suddenly left the scene. Detectives pursued him, arrested him, and then in follow-up, Lori's family then talked to her. She was already in prison. She was in jail, I should say. She was in jail because she had been ordered by the court to produce JJ for this welfare check. Where is he? And she didn't do it. So she's still in jail for that. And gets her sister Summer. She asked her sister Summer to give her a call. And Summer says, how could you? They found the bodies of your children, which caused Lori absolutely no surprise at all. She did not seem shocked by that. And Summer says, you were dancing on the beach and your kids were dead. And Lori said, yeah, months later, I was trying to go on. Now, this phone call, because it was a jail phone call, was recorded. And it's significant because Lori said, yeah, months later, it had only been less than 2 months since Tylee's death and 6 weeks since JJ's, when she got married and was dancing on the beach. Nonetheless, the implication from Lori is that she knew at the time they died that they had died and hid it. And the prosecution will argue was intimately involved in all of that. And last piece of evidence, also after the fact, was a phone call between Colby Ryan, Lori's son, who is still living, adult son, also recorded. And it was less evidence than it was a very moving argument during the trial, or a very moving moment. That's a better way to put it. Colby said, to his mother, Lori, as he talked to her on the phone. She's in jail. He says, to know that this was brutal, through tears. I mean, he was so emotional. To know that they're gone and you knew. And my phone's being texted by my little sister, who is not even alive, because Lori had Tylee's phone and would text Colby as if Tylee, in fact, was alive when she wasn't. He said, my little brother, who is the sweetest little kid ever, you tell me this is God's will for my whole family, including my stepfather, to be dead? After everything that you tried to tell me, you can tell me right now that Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, is on your side? You tell me that with all the conviction of your heart, that Jesus Christ is on your side right now, please. And Lori says, I can tell you that. That, in a nutshell, is the case. And what a case. What a case it has been. Tomorrow, we will finally have closing arguments in the case, and the case is going to go to the jury. We will go live as soon as the verdict is coming back. We will go live. Definitely hit the subscribe button, because you don't want to miss the end of the story. We're about to find out what happens to Lori Vallow Daybell, what the jury decides in her case. I don't think it's going to take long. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow. It could be later than that, but we will go live as soon as we get some information for that. So I have a couple of things I want to ask you to do as we are, we're closing out. The first is, where do you want to go next? What cases really interest you? What do you want to cover? What have you been following or thinking about or looking at or reading about? Tell me that. Put that in the chat. And then the second thing is, what are the pieces of evidence in this case that we've talked about tonight, or ones you remember that I didn't even include in the timeline, that you think were really critically important? Because I'm going to be doing that summary. It'll be short video on these are the most important pieces of evidence in the whole case. And I would really like your input on what you think it is. I see people saying co-burglar. Definitely co-burglar. That's not even a question. 100% yes. So, but please put other ones in, because he only has one hearing coming up, and that's not for at least another month. So it'll be a while till we can cover that. And I want some other things that you'd be really interested in coming up. So thanks for watching. And I have, of course, forgotten my outro. I have to put that in. Thank you, Kay Oakley. I appreciate it. So I forgot to put that in, but I will see you. We will go live tomorrow night at 7. If the jury isn't back, we'll go whenever the jury gets back, if the jury comes back earlier than that. So absolutely hit that subscribe button. I'd appreciate it if you'd also hit the like button. And I am really going to look forward to seeing you either early or at 7 p.m. tomorrow night.